Let's get started on our own op art hand. What you're going to need is a ruler, a bag of crayons, pencil, and your paper. We're going to use our non-dominant hand, the hand we do not draw with, and we're going to press it firmly down onto our paper with our fingers spread out. Then we're going to trace around carefully, not to move that non-dominant hand. Go inside each of those fingers, making sure to leave the spaces obvious, and all the way down to the wrist where it looks like it runs off. If you have any issues, you can erase and fix. My ring was there, so I'm just making that straight. Then I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to put the edge of it horizontally, and I'm going to go from the wrist out to the edge of the paper to make my stripe. I'm going to go up the same thickness of the ruler all the way up the page until I run out of room. Every time I'm moving it up, I'm putting my pencil on the hand or the fingers, and then I'm brushing the stroke out to the edge of the paper. Now that I'm up into the finger spaces, I'm still going to go out from the side of the hand and the thumb, but I'm also going to do the space between. So I have to be careful whenever I see that we're doing a fingertip or between fingers. I'm just making that a little darker. My pencil was pretty light. So I'm going to do the same thing from finger out, now between those fingers, and then from the finger out to the edge of the page. And move up, finger out. Make sure that I don't cross over my tips of that pinky. And then I'm going between the fingers and then out to the edge again. I'm going to continue that all the way up. Until I get up here to the top, and then it's not going to exactly be an equal stripe at the very, very top. Now for the lines inside the hand. We're going to make an arched line, very arched, coming from one side to the other to connect the lines that we just made. Whenever we get up into the fingertips, it gets a little tougher, so you have to pay attention, like on that thumb. Here, we just go fingertip to fingertip. Now we're going to connect these two lines like it's a ring. We're making an arch, and the higher the arch, the more that the hand is going to feel like it is coming up off the page when we get ready to add our color. Now that you've picked out your colors, we're going to get started. I like to start at the top and go on and trace along the line with the color that I'm going to use above that. So I traced a little bit a hard line so that it's dark, and then I'm coloring in lightly. Lightly coloring is going to be very important. You don't want to fill that in a dark color. You want to just lightly press. So now I'm going to do that. I'm doing a Roy G. Biv. Okay, so red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple hand. So I'm going to be going over both of those lines and then filling in lightly. So I have a dark edge on each side. I'm going to do that for the rest of the hand, but I'm going to skip around the actual hand drawing and just do outside of the hand. I'm going to make sure that my hand is going side to side and not ever changing directions. If you notice, my hand is always going left to right after I have traced these fingers. So I'm tracing my tips, and then after the tips are traced, I'm going to start to trace that top line and then fill in lightly. Especially on a color like yellow, you're going to need to be light. Now I'm going to be working on the green section. I'm going to do the same tracing, and notice that between the fingers, I'm going to trace that whole section in dark green, and then I'm going to lightly color that in just a minute. Now I'm going to continue that for the rest of my colors. I'm going to speed that up so you can see. I'm going to be adding color in an arched pattern so that I can make it look like this arm is coming up off of the paper. We've got to make sure that there's an arch and then dark shadows on the edge of the arm. When we do the dark shadow beside the arm, I'm going to make sure that it is going the same direction as that same horizontal stroke that we did already. So watch that I'm arching here, lightly arching the color. You want to be able to see that it's light blue, but you don't want it to be too dark, because now I'm going to add in that dark edge. Now it's extremely important that that is at a diagonal. Notice those are going up at a diagonal angle up over the arm. It's giving us the illusion of space there, of form. Now, what really makes this stand out is doing a horizontal dark spot on each side. So we're shading it darkly on both sides, so then it gives that illusion of flat and then arched. We're going to continue that all the way up, matching the color that goes on the side with the one that's coming up and over. You're doing that arched line, lightly cover up that whole space with an arched line. If you go horizontal, then it is going to be obvious and it will make your illusion not work as well. Then we're going to do our dark spots, making sure to go up and over at an angle on the wrist, and then flat whenever we get to the sides. So we're going to go flat side to side, and you can kind of spread those in and out just to give some variation in the length of the shadow where it looks like it's being pulled. Now for the red section, we're going to still do that arched line coming up and over. But when we get to the part where we're going to see that that thumb is going to come into play, I'm going to go on and arch and stop at that thumb, okay? Then we're going to move on over here and start creating an arch on the thumb. And we'll kind of meet down on that hand where the thumb meets that hand. But you do want to make sure that there's two definite lifts, the lift in the hand and the lift in the thumb. We're going to do that with our shadowing. We're going to shadow just slightly right there at the edge of the crevice of the thumb on each side at an angle. you're going to come all the way down the thumb side with tiny little diagonals coming up. And then you're going to have to do the side-to-side horizontal stroke that makes the paper seem flat on each side of that raised hand. Now we're getting into the trickiest part of the whole hand, so have patience with yourself and pay attention. We're going to arch up and over each finger. I start with my pinky, and then I'm going to go up over the entire hand in an arched motion, going up into those fingers until they separate, and then I'm going to arch individually over each one of them. And I cannot forget that that thumb tip is part of that. So I'm going to arch over that as well. Next, I'm going to add in my shadows. I'm going to make sure I'm coming up and arching up onto the edge of the thumb on both sides. Then I'm going to go up on the hand. Now I've got to do a little tiny dark spot on each finger, on the side of each finger. So you're going to just make a little diagonal line that shows that there is part of the finger coming up off of the paper. And then we're going to add our horizontal strokes onto the sides of the hand. And that is our hardest part because we're doing all 5 fingers in that one section. That's the only time you'll deal with all 5 fingers. And then we get into another section like this blue one where it's much easier. We're just doing arches over our fingertips. This is actually the middle of our fingers. Just arch on each one. And then we're going to darken the sides at a diagonal. And we're going to darken the sides of the paper part at a horizontal. Follow the same steps for our green and yellow parts of the fingers on my example. Arching and then darkening in our shadows on the fingers at an angle and then off the fingers at a horizontal. And we're having to make sure that we get in between those fingers just a tiny little bit on that paper where it looks like it's on the outside of the hands. This will be your last step and you'll be finished up. You can look over your project and make sure you're happy with your optical illusion. You can always add in more shadows and make sure that your lines are going in the correct direction.